The quantum drive hummed its familiar lullaby as Captain Juliana Nash studied the restricted zone markers flashing across her navigation screen. After 15 years of deep space exploration, she thought she'd seen everything the universe had to offer. She was wrong. "Captain, we're detecting an anomalous signal originating from Sector 7, reported her ship's AI, designated Pulse. Signal pattern matches no known configuration in our database." Nash leaned forward in her pilot's chair, her dark eyes reflecting the mysterious waveform dancing across the holographic display. "What's the signal strength, Pulse?" "Weak but consistent. Estimated origin point is 3 light-years into the restricted zone." The AI's tone carried a hint of concern. "I must remind you that entering this sector violates at least 7 interstellar coalition protocols." Nash ran her fingers through her short silver-streaked hair, a habit from her academy days that surfaced whenever she faced a difficult decision. The restricted zone had been established decades ago after several ships vanished without a trace. Official reports blamed gravitational anomalies, but Nash had always suspected there was more to the story. "Play the signal," she commanded, settling back in her chair. The ship's speakers crackled to life, filling the cockpit with an eerie melody that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. It wasn't mechanical or artificial, it sounded organic, almost alive. "Analysis suggests biological components in the signal structure," Pulse reported. "Similar to neural patterns, but far more complex than any known species." Nash's fingers danced across the controls, plotting a course. "Log official reason for entry. Investigation of potential distress signal in accordance with Space Maritime Law, Section 31.4. Noted, though I suspect the Coalition Board of Inquiry will find that justification questionable at best." Pulse's avatar flickered with what Nash swore was disapproval. "Calculating safest approach vector." As they crossed the boundary into restricted space, the quantum drive's hum changed pitch, becoming deeper, more resonant. The stars ahead seemed to shimmer like heat waves rising from desert sand. Nash had never seen anything like it in all her years of exploration. "Detecting unusual energy readings," Pulse announced. "Reminiscent of quantum entanglement, but operating on a macro scale. This should be theoretically impossible." Nash checked her ship's shields, ensuring all systems were at maximum capacity. "The most interesting discoveries usually are, old friend." They traveled deeper into the restricted zone, the strange phenomena intensifying. Sensor readings became increasingly erratic, showing phantom mass signatures that appeared and vanished like ghosts. The signal grew stronger, pulling them toward a star system that didn't appear on any official charts. "Captain, I'm detecting a planet ahead. Spectral analysis indicates Class M, but..." Pulse paused, something the AI rarely did. "The readings don't make sense. The entire planet appears to be in a state of quantum flux." As they entered orbit, Nash gasped. Below them hung a world that seemed to pulse with its own inner light, its surface a mesmerizing swirl of emerald and jade. Massive structures of impossible architecture rose from the surface, their forms seeming to shift and change even as she watched. "The signal is emanating from one of those structures," Pulse reported. "I'm also detecting multiple life signs. Humanoid, but with significant biological differences from known species." Nash began pre-landing checks, her heart racing with the thrill of discovery. "Any signs of defensive systems?" "Negative, though our sensors are having difficulty penetrating the quantum interference." "Captain, I must advise extreme caution. The energy patterns here are unlike anything in my database." As they descended through the atmosphere, the ship's systems began to behave erratically. The quantum drive fluctuated, and the artificial gravity wavered. Nash compensated manually, fighting to maintain control as they approached a clearing near one of the massive structures. "Multiple life forms approaching our landing zone," Pulse warned. "They appear to be waiting for us." Nash armed her personal shield and checked her translator. Well, it would be rude to keep our hosts waiting. The landing struts touched down with a gentle thud, and Nash took a deep breath, preparing herself for first contact. Through the view screen, she could see tall, elegant figures emerging from the misty forest. Their skin seemed to shift between different shades of green, and they moved with an otherworldly grace that made them appear to float rather than walk. "Captain," Pulsa's voice was unusually soft. "The signal, it's changed. It's not a distress call anymore. I believe it's a trap." Before Nash could respond, a wave of energy washed over the ship, and all systems went dark. In the sudden silence, she could hear something that sounded like singing, beautiful, terrible, and completely alien. "Well," Nash muttered, checking her backup systems, "looks like we're about to find out why this zone is restricted." The air shimmered like liquid crystal as Nash stepped out of her powerless ship. The alien figures approached with deliberate grace, their movements synchronized as if participating in an elaborate dance. Their leader, nearly 7 feet tall with intricate patterns swirling across her jade skin, stepped forward. "Welcome, Seeker," she spoke in perfect standard, though her mouth didn't move. The words seemed to form directly in Nash's mind. "I am High Priestess Nixis of the Verdant Sisterhood. We have been expecting you." Nash kept her hands visible but close to her pulse pistol. "Expecting me specifically, or just waiting for someone curious enough to investigate your signal?" A sound like wind chimes filled the air, their laughter, Nash realized. Nixis gestured to the towering structure behind them, its crystalline spires seeming to grow and shift in Nash's peripheral vision. "Come. You must be tired from your journey through the veil." Nixis turned, clearly expecting Nash to follow. "Your vessel will remain safe. It merely sleeps, as all technology does in our sacred spaces." Nash glanced back at her ship, where Pulsa's systems remained dark. "And if I decline your hospitality? Then you would miss the purpose of your coming." Nixis's eyes swirled with deeper shades of green. "The currents of fate do not flow backward, Juliana Nash." The use of her name sent a chill down Nash's spine, but her curiosity overwhelmed her caution. She followed the sisterhood through gardens of impossible plants that responded to their presence, blooming and shifting as they passed. Inside the structure, Nash found herself in a vast chamber that seemed larger than the building's exterior suggested. Dozens of green-skinned figures moved about their tasks, some tending to floating orbs of energy, others transcribing ancient texts that glowed with their own light. "Your confusion is natural," Nixis said, leading Nash to a circular platform. "Your species perceives reality through such a limited lens. We exist simultaneously in multiple quantum states, shepherding the energies that bind existence together." "You're talking about quantum manipulation at a macro level," Nash said, her scientific mind racing. "That's supposed to be impossible." "Impossibility is merely the shadow cast by ignorance." Nixis waved her hand, and the platform beneath them began to ascend. "We have watched your kind for centuries, waiting for one who could bridge the gap between our worlds." They emerged in a chamber near the spire's peak, where a group of shamans surrounded a pool of swirling energy. Nash noticed their movement seemed to influence the patterns in the liquid light, creating complex geometric forms that hurt her eyes to look at directly. "Our power grows weak," Nixis explained, her tone carrying a note of sadness. "The ancient harmonies require new frequencies to remain stable. Your arrival was prophesied, Juliana Nash. You will help us preserve our way of life." Nash watched as one of the shamans passed her hand through the energy pool, causing ripples that seemed to distort reality itself. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" "By joining our circle." Nixis smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The ritual of integration will allow you to perceive as we do, to exist as we exist. It is a great honor." Before Nash could respond, a younger shaman burst into the chamber, her skin flickering between shades of panic. "High Priestess. The harmonics are destabilizing in the lower chambers." The containment fields cannot hold. Nixus's expression hardened. Prepare the emergency protocols. Captain Nash, please remain here. We will continue our discussion shortly. She glided from the room, followed by most of the other shamans. Left alone with 2 guards, Nash studied the energy pool more carefully. The pattern seemed familiar somehow, reminiscent of the quantum fluctuations she'd observed in deep space near collapsed stars. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a quiet voice said beside her. Nash turned to find one of the younger shamans, her skin a paler green than the others. "I am Thura. And you should know, the ritual they speak of is no honor. It is a death sentence." Nash tensed, but kept her voice calm. "Care to elaborate?" "The sisterhood doesn't nurture harmony," Thura whispered, her eyes darting to the guards. "They harvest it. From living beings. From their consciousness, their quantum signatures. Your ship didn't lose power, they drained it. Just as they planned to drain you." The energy pool pulsed, and Nash could have sworn she heard screaming in its light. Nash's mind raced as she processed Thura's warning. The young shaman stood uncomfortably close, pretending to explain the energy pool while whispering crucial information. "They've done this for millennia," Thura continued, her voice barely audible. "Each ritual adds another consciousness to the collective, powering their quantum manipulation abilities. The restricted zone exists because they created it, to hide the disappearances." A distant explosion rocked the structure, sending ripples through the energy pool. The guards shifted nervously but maintained their posts. "The containment systems are failing more frequently now," Thura explained. "The collective consciousness is becoming unstable. They believe your human quantum signature might stabilize it." Nash kept her expression neutral, playing the role of an honored guest. "How long do I have?" "The preparation ritual begins at moonrise." Thura's skin rippled with anxiety. "Once they mark you with the sigils, the binding process cannot be stopped." Before they could continue, Nixus returned with her entourage. The High Priestess's skin glowed with an intense emerald light, but Nash now recognized the subtle signs of strain around her eyes. "My apologies for the interruption," Nixus said. "Maintaining harmony requires constant attention. Thura, you may begin preparing our honored guest for the ceremony." Thura bowed deeply. "Yes, High Priestess. I will ensure she is properly cleansed and adorned." Nash followed Thura through crystalline corridors that seemed to sing with each footstep. They entered a chamber filled with floating globes of light and pools of shimmering liquid. "The cleansing must be genuine," Thura said loudly for the benefit of the guards outside. Then, softer, "The ritual chamber is heavily shielded, but the lower levels where they store the quantum cores are vulnerable. If you could reach them, I'd need access to their systems," Nash whispered back as Thura began the cleansing ritual, painting luminescent symbols on her skin. "And a way to neutralize the quantum field affecting my ship. The marks I'm painting." Thura's hands moved in intricate patterns. "They're not the traditional binding sigils. They're ancient protection runes. They'll shield you partially from their power, give you a chance to act." Nash winced as the paint burned slightly. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've watched too many souls be consumed." Thura's eyes clouded with memory. "My sister was one of them. They told us it was a great honor, that she would achieve transcendence. Instead, I felt her consciousness shatter as they fed her to the collective." The paint dried, forming patterns that seemed to move on Nash's skin. She could feel a subtle vibration emanating from them, interfering with the ambient quantum field. "When they bring you to the ritual chamber," Thura continued, "they'll arrange you within a focusing array. The crystals amplify their power, but they're incredibly unstable. A sudden disruption in the harmonic frequency could cascade through their entire system," Nash finished, understanding dawning. "Like a quantum feedback loop." Thera nodded slightly. But you'll have to act fast. Once the ritual begins, the collective consciousness will attempt to overwhelm you. Even with the protection runes, you'll only have moments before your mind is absorbed. Heavy footsteps approached, the honor guard coming to escort Nash to the ceremony. She saw fear in Thera's eyes, but also determination. Remember, Thera whispered as the door opened, the collective is strongest when in harmony. Create discord, and their power weakens. Nash was led through increasingly elaborate chambers, each thrumming with more intense energy than the last. Other shamans joined the procession, their skin glowing with power as they began a low, haunting chant. They entered a vast circular chamber dominated by a massive crystalline array. Hundreds of shamans lined the walls, their combined energy making the air itself crackle with potential. At the center, a platform of pure light awaited. Nyxus stood before it, her form seeming to exist in multiple places simultaneously. The time has come, Juliana Nash, for you to transcend your limited existence and join our eternal harmony. Nash stepped onto the platform, feeling the energy begin to course through her body. The protection runes burned against her skin, fighting the invasion of foreign power. As the chanting reached a crescendo, Nash caught Thera's eye among the crowd. The young shaman gave an almost imperceptible nod. The ritual began, and Nash felt thousands of alien minds pressing against her consciousness, trying to break through, to absorb her essence into their collective. She smiled grimly. They had no idea what they were about to absorb. Nash felt the collective consciousness surge against her mental defenses like a tide of emerald fire. The protection runes Thera had painted blazed against her skin, creating interference patterns in the quantum field. She forced herself to remain calm, remembering her zero-G training from the academy. Sometimes the key to survival was to let yourself fall. So she fell. Instead of fighting the thousands of alien minds pressing against her consciousness, she opened herself to them, but not in the way they expected. Nash had spent 15 years navigating the chaos of deep space, facing the mind-bending physics of quantum anomalies and gravitational distortions. Her thoughts weren't the orderly patterns the sisterhood expected to absorb. They were a storm. Something is wrong, Nyxus's voice cut through the chanting. Her consciousness, it resists harmonization. Nash pushed back against the collective, forcing them to experience every near-death experience, every impossible decision, every moment of pure human chaos she'd ever encountered. The crystalline array began to vibrate discordantly. Contain her. Nyxus commanded, but it was too late. Nash's memories of quantum storms and collapsed stars crashed through their mental defenses like a hammer through glass. The carefully maintained harmony of their collective consciousness began to fracture. Thera seized the moment of confusion to act. She rushed to one of the auxiliary control crystals, her hands dancing across its surface in complex patterns. Alarms began blaring throughout the structure. The containment fields, a shaman cried out. They're failing in the lower chambers. Nash felt the collective's grip on her mind weaken as panic spread through their ranks. She forced herself to move despite the paralyzing energy coursing through her body, rolling off the platform of light. The protection runes flared one final time before burning away completely. Seal the chamber. Nyxus's form flickered between multiple states, her control wavering. The ritual must be completed. But chaos had been unleashed. The quantum cores in the lower levels, destabilized by Thera's sabotage, began to release their captured consciousness signatures. Thousands of trapped minds burst free of their prison, their combined confusion and anger further disrupting the sisterhood's power. Nash staggered to her feet, fighting waves of dizziness. Thera. The ship. The young shaman nodded, pressing a final sequence into the control crystal. Throughout the structure, the quantum dampening field began to collapse. Nash felt her neural link with Pulse spring back to life. Pulse, emergency startup sequence, she commanded through the link. Get those engines hot. Systems restoring, the AI responded. Captain, I'm detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the facility. This entire structure could collapse into a localized quantum singularity. The chamber descended into pandemonium as more shamans lost control of their powers. The walls themselves began to shift and warp, reality bending under the strain of unleashed quantum forces. Nash fought her way through the chaos toward Thera. You've doomed us all. Nixus's voice boomed, her form growing to fill half the chamber. The collective must be maintained. The collective was built on stolen lives, Thera shot back, her own power flaring as she helped Nash toward the exit. It deserves to fall. They ran through corridors that twisted like serpents, pursued by shamans whose powers were rapidly failing without the collective to sustain them. Behind them, the crystal array finally shattered, releasing a shockwave of quantum energy that began to tear the structure apart. Pulse, I need that pickup now. Nash shouted as they emerged into the open air. The massive structure behind them was collapsing in on itself, folding into impossible geometries. Approaching your position, Pulse responded. Though I should note that flying through a quantum storm violates at least 12 safety protocols. Nash laughed despite the situation. Just like old times, friend. The ship appeared overhead, cutting through the chaos on pillars of plasma fire. The cargo ramp descended as reality itself began to unravel around them. A wall of quantum energy erupted between them and the ship. Nixus materialized from its swirling surface, her form now a towering amalgamation of light and fury. You cannot escape, the High Priestess declared, her voice resonating on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The harmony must be preserved, even if I must absorb your consciousness directly. Tendrils of emerald energy lashed out, trying to ensnare Nash and Thera. The protection runes had burned away completely, leaving them vulnerable to the full force of Nixus's power. But Nash had been changed by her brief connection to the collective. She could see the quantum fields now, could understand their flow and ebb. More importantly, she could see the desperate fear driving Nixus's actions. Your harmony is a lie, Nash said, standing her ground. It's not preservation, it's prison. Those minds you captured? They're free now. Your power is breaking apart without them. You understand nothing. Nixus's form fluctuated violently. We maintained order in this sector for millennia. Without our influence, chaos will reign. Chaos? Nash laughed. I've spent my entire career navigating chaos. Let me show you what I've learned. Drawing on her new awareness of quantum fields, Nash reached out and grabbed one of the energy tendrils. Pain seared through her nerves, but she held on, using the connection to force her own memories into Nixus's consciousness, the beauty of nebulae born from stellar destruction, the complex order hidden within chaotic systems, the strength found in adapting to change rather than forcing stasis. Nixus screamed, her form destabilizing as Nash's chaos infected her perfect harmonies. The quantum barrier flickered. Thera, run! Nash commanded. But the young shaman stood firm. Not without you. Her pale green skin began to glow as she added her power to Nash's assault, channeling the ancient knowledge she'd secretly preserved. Together, they pushed back against Nixus's power. The High Priestess's form began to fragment, splitting into countless quantum states. You'll destroy everything we built. Nixus's voice distorted across multiple dimensions. No, Thera declared. We'll let it rebuild itself, naturally this time. Without theft. Without imprisonment. The barrier shattered. Nash and Thera sprinted for the ship as reality buckled around them. They dove through the cargo door just as Pulse engaged the engines. Quantum singularity forming, the AI announced. Calculating escape trajectory. Through the view screen, Nash watched as the massive structure imploded, taking with it centuries of stolen power. Nyxa's final scream echoed across quantum frequencies as her physical form collapsed into the singularity. But something else was happening. The freed consciousness signatures, instead of dissipating, began to coalesce into new patterns. Where the Sisterhood's temple had stood, streams of quantum energy started weaving themselves into natural harmonies. "The balance restores itself," Thera whispered, watching in awe. "Not through force, but through freedom." "Pulse, are you recording this?" Nash asked. "Affirmative, Captain. Though I should note that the quantum phenomena we're observing violate approximately 37 known laws of physics." Nash smiled. "The best discoveries usually do." She turned to Thera. "What will you do now?" The young shaman's skin shifted through thoughtful patterns of green. "There will be others like my sister, consciousness signatures trapped in similar facilities across the galaxy. They deserve to be free." "Sounds like a worthy mission." Nash settled into the pilot's chair. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in a partnership? A quantum-sensitive navigator could be useful in my line of work." Thera's eyes lit up with possibilities. "You would trust me? After everything my people did?" "Trust isn't about what your people did." Nash engaged the quantum drive, plotting a course out of the restricted zone. "It's about what you did. Besides, the universe is full of mysteries waiting to be solved. We might as well face them together." As they accelerated into quantum space, Nash reflected that some restrictions existed not to protect people from what lay beyond, but to protect secrets that deserve to be exposed. The real danger wasn't in breaking rules, it was in blindly following them. Behind them, the restricted zone began to change. The quantum storms calmed, forming new patterns of natural harmony. And in the depths of space, consciousness signatures that had been trapped for centuries danced freely among the stars, finally finding their own way home. "Captain," Pulse interrupted her thoughts, "the interstellar coalition is demanding an explanation for our presence in the restricted zone." Nash exchanged glances with Thera. Tell them the restriction is no longer necessary. And log a new mission parameter, there are more secrets out there waiting to be uncovered. And more people waiting to be freed," Thera added softly. The ship hummed as it carried them deeper into space, leaving behind a revolution that would reshape understanding of consciousness and quantum physics for generations to come. But for Nash, it was just another day of pushing boundaries and breaking rules in pursuit of truth. After all, the most important discoveries always lay beyond the next restriction.